Chapter 2, Part 2 continued. He says in the morning it turned into them things like ropes in the trees and hung in the branches. He says will it come back tonight? But there isn't a beastie. There was no laughter at all now, and more grave watching. Ralph pushed back both hands through his hair and looked at the little boy in mixed amusement and exasperation. Jack seized the conch. Ralph's right, of course. There isn't a snake thing. But if there was a snake, we'd hunt it and kill it. We're going to hunt pigs to get meat for everybody. And we'll look for the snake thing too. But there isn't a snake. We'll make sure when we go hunting. Ralph was annoyed and for the moment defeated. He felt himself facing something ungraspable. The eyes that looked so intently at him were without humor. But there isn't a beast. Something he had not known was there rose in him and compelled him to make the point loudly and again. But I tell you, there isn't a beast. The assembly was silent. So I want to stop there for just a second because I want you to think about the fact that the oldest boys are about 12, and then they range down to around 5 years old. So the main audience is a group of younger children. And if you have a brother or sister, or you remember as a child, when you thought there was something under the bed or in the closet or a monster, you didn't understand parents saying things like, oh, they only have those in India and Africa. To you, it was very real, right? So the problem here with Ralph as the leader is that he's just dismissing their fears, where Jack, who's very aggressive, is saying, yeah, there's no beastie, but look, if we see it, we'll kill it. So he's offering a solution that Ralph is not offering. So this is kind of Ralph's first failure as leader. Ralph lifted the conch again, and his good humor came back as he thought of what he had to say next. Now, we come to the most important thing. I was thinking while we were climbing the mountain. He flashed a conspiratorial grin at the other two. And on the beach just now, this is what I thought. We want to have fun, and we want to be rescued. The passionate noise of agreement from the assembly hit him like a wave, and he lost his thread. He thought again. We want to be rescued, and of course we shall be rescued. Voices babbled. The simple statement, unbacked by any proof but the weight of Ralph's new authority, brought light and happiness. So again, they're children, so they're pretty easy to sway. But once night comes, it's probably going to be a little different, and the priority to them is not getting hurt by the beastie rather than being rescued. He had to wave the conch before he could make them hear him. My father's in the Navy. He said there aren't any unknown islands left. He says the Queen has a big room full of maps, and all the islands in the world are drawn there. So the Queen's got a picture of this island. Again came the sounds of cheerfulness and better heart. And sooner or later, a ship will put in here. It might even be Daddy's ship. So you see, sooner or later, we shall be rescued. Notice how the author chooses Daddy instead of Dad. Okay, to again remind us that these are children playing as adults. He paused, the point was made. The assembly was lifted towards safety by his words. They liked and now respected him. Spontaneously, they began to clap, and presently the platform was loud with applause. Ralph flushed, looking sideways at Piggy's open admiration, and then the other way at Jack, who was smirking and showing that he too knew how to clap. Ralph waved the conch. Shut up! Wait! Listen! He went on in the silence, borne on his triumph. There's another thing. We can help them to find us. If a ship comes near the island, they may not notice us, so we must make smoke on top of the mountain. We must make a fire. A fire! Make a fire! At once half the boys were on their feet. Jack clambered among them, the conch forgotten. Come on, follow me. The space under the palm trees was full of noise and movement. Ralph was on his feet too, shouting for quiet. But no one heard him. All at once the crowd swayed toward the island and was gone, following Jack. So we also see that even though Jack doesn't have the best intentions, possibly, and he's aggressive and fairly mean, he does have some natural qualities as a leader. But just because someone can be a leader doesn't mean they should be, right? History tells us that. Even the tiny children went and did their best among the leaves and broken branches. Ralph was left holding the conch with no one but Piggy. Piggy's breathing was quite restored. Like kids, he said scornfully, acting like a crowd of kids. Ralph looked at him doubtedly and laid the conch on the tree trunk. I bet it's gone tea time, said Piggy. What do you think they're doing on that mountain? He caressed the shell respectfully, then stopped and looked up. Ralph, hey, where you going? Ralph was already clambering over the first smashed swathes of the scar. A long way ahead of him was crashing and laughter. Piggy watched him in disgust. Like a crowd of kids. He sighed, bent, and laced up his shoes. The noise of the errant assembly faded up the mountain. Then, with the martyred expression of a parent who has to keep up with the senseless ebullience of the children, he picked up the conch, turned toward the forest, and began to pick his way over the tumbled scar. Below the other side of the mountaintop was a platform of forest. Once more, Ralph found himself making the cupping gesture. Down there, we could get as much wood as we want. Jack nodded and pulled at his underlip. Starting perhaps 100 feet below them on the steeper side of the mountain, the patch might have been designed expressly for fuel. Trees, forced by the damp heat, found too little soil for full growth, fell early and decayed. Creepers cradled them, and new saplings searched a way up. So there's a lot of kindling and some dead branches, okay? Which if you've ever had to light a fire camping or something such as that, if you've ever tried to light like a wet stick, doesn't work, right? So the kindling that they have is prime for a fire. Jack turned to the choir who stood ready. Their black caps of maintenance were slid over one ear like berets. We'll build a pile. Come on. They found the likeliest path down and began tugging at the dead wood. And the small boys who had reached the top came sliding too, till everyone but Piggy was busy. Most of the wood was so rotten that when they pulled it, it broke up into a shower of fragments and wood lice and decay. But some trunks came out in one piece. The twins, Sam and Eric, were the first to get a likely log, but they could do nothing until Ralph, Jack, Simon, Roger, and Maurice found room for a handhold. Then they inched the grotesque, dead thing up the rock and toppled it over on top. Each party of boys added a quota, less or more, and the pile grew. At the return, Ralph found himself alone on a limb with Jack, and they grinned at each other, sharing this burden. Once more, amid the breeze, the shouting, the slanting sunlight on the high mountain was shed that glamour, that strange invisible light of friendship, adventure, and content. Almost too heavy, Jack grinned back. Not for the two of us. Together, joined in an effort by the burden, they staggered up the last steep of the mountain. Together they chanted, 1, 2, 3, and crashed the log onto the great pile. Then they stepped back laughing with triumphant pleasure so that immediately Ralph had to stand on his head. Below them, boys were still laboring, though some of the small ones had lost interest and were searching this new forest for fruit.